031, Mr. Hoffman, please stay. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Are you sure about this intel? Jacob bellowed into the phone, his voice like a volcanic eruption. Tai's voice responded, "What's wrong with my information?" Jacob exploded, "Are you kidding me? The proof is right in front of us. Do you think I'm stupid?" Tai wanted to say, "You're acting like a baby," but held back. Instead, he said, "I don't understand what you're saying." Jacob snapped, "You don't understand? Do I have to spell it out for you?" Tai calmly replied, "Go ahead, spell it out." Jacob was so furious he started laughing. "Ha! Fine, I will. You told me Munich 1860 was changing coaches, right? Did they? Ha! Did they change coaches? Do you think I'm a moron you can rip off? You better cough up the money you swindled from me, or else." Tai remained calm. "When did I tell you Munich was changing coaches right now?" Jacob was taken aback, he hadn't expected Tai to pull this. Was this guy seriously trying to weasel his way out of it? Jacob's blood was boiling, barely keeping his anger in check. He said in a frigid voice, "You're really playing me for a fool. You said it to my face. Are you seriously going to deny it?" Tai calmly repeated, word by word, "Did you really hear me say that Munich 1860 is changing coaches right now?" Jacob froze. Tai continued, "I distinctly told you Stoffs was in private contact with Linen. Contact. Not that Munich 1860 was going to change coaches." "Got it." Jacob thought hard. Maybe that was right, maybe Tai never explicitly said Munich 1860 was changing coaches. Maybe he'd jumped to conclusions. Jacob reconsidered, but then, a new realization hit him. He shouted into the phone, "Before Tong Yi returned to Germany from England, when you told me Tong Yi was going to Germany, you said Munich 1860 had finalized their new coach. You can't deny that, you greedy jerk." Tai was getting angry. This guy was too much. Tai roared, "You're a brain-dead idiot. Listen up. I said Munich 1860 had decided on a new coach, but I didn't say they were changing coaches now. I meant in 3 months. Pay attention, Mr. Braindead reporter." Jacob was stunned again. Maybe Tai did say that. He suddenly felt a pang of embarrassment. His own brain, there was a problem. It was all Tong Yi's fault. Tong Yi had made him look like a fool in front of his colleagues, a complete joke. If it weren't for that, he wouldn't be so quick to fly off the handle and make such a stupid mistake. Damn Tong Yi. "I'll get you for this," Tai added, still furious, "if you don't trust me and think I'm a liar, then we're done. Don't come crawling back to me. I guess my information isn't good enough for you anyway." If Tong Yi knew he was the reason these two were at each other's throats, he'd be ecstatic. Jacob immediately backpedaled, No. It was my mistake. I was confused. I wasn't really mad at you. You're a trustworthy partner. We can definitely keep working together." Tai didn't want to lose Jacob as a client, not really. Where else would he find someone to buy his tips? So, he reluctantly forgave him. They chatted for a few more minutes. Jacob, looking up, spotted a familiar face in the distance. It was Hoffman, Munich 1860's veteran center-back. Why wasn't he at practice? What was he doing here? Years of reporting experience told him something was up. His eyes lit up. He quickly said goodbye to Tai and hung up. Then, he sprinted towards Hoffman, waving and shouting, "Mr. Hoffman, hold on a second." Hoffman was seething. A fire raged in his chest, and he desperately needed to vent it, but he couldn't. It was so frustrating. And that Tong Yi had humiliated him in front of everyone. He was ready to explode. "Damn pretty boy, you're dead meat." Even away from the training ground, he was still fuming. He hated Tong Yi even more for sending him to the second team. His career was on the line. Hoffman's face was like thunder. He just wanted the team to change coaches and kick Tong Yi to the curb. "Linen, where are you? When are you taking over?" Of course, he also hated Stoff's assistant, Mia Arendt. If that little snake hadn't promised him the team was definitely changing coaches, he never would have jumped out and confronted Tong Yi. She was the one who'd screwed him over. What was he going to do? He didn't want to retire now. He still wanted to pad his retirement fund for a few more years. Thinking about it, his anger toward Tong Yi flared anew. You smug bastard, don't get too comfortable. I'm not going to make it easy for you. Suddenly, someone called out to him, Mr. Hoffman, wait a minute. Can I ask you a couple of questions? Hoffman turned and saw a bearded, pot-bellied man waving a camera. Hoffman didn't recognize him, but he could tell from his clothes and equipment that he was a reporter. Hoffman eyed him. Who are you? The man pulled out a business card and handed it to Hoffman. Hello, Mr. Hoffman, I'm Sebastian Jacob, a reporter for Bild. Bild was a well-known media outlet. Hoffman glanced at the card and then back at Jacob. His eyes widened. This was the reporter who'd photographed Stoff's meeting with Linen, wasn't it? Did he have more news? Suddenly, Hoffman was very interested in this guy. What do you want? Jacob said, I'd like to get your thoughts on Coach Tong Yi. An interview, if you're willing. Hoffman was overjoyed. This reporter was perfect. He could use him to make trouble for Tong Yi. He smirked to himself. You smug bastard, you're about to learn what happens when you mess with me, he said. Of course. Jacob was thrilled. Great. Let's find a place to talk. They immediately hit it off and headed for a nearby cafe. The next day, at Munich 1860s training ground, Tong Yi stood before the players and said, the day after tomorrow, we have our first preseason warm-up. Honestly, I don't care about the result of a scrimmage in Zhejiang, or any of the warm-up games. They only serve one purpose, to refine our tactics, adjust our form, and identify problems. So, relax. Despite Tong Yi's words, the Munich 1860 players, especially the younger ones, were still a little nervous. Tong Yi continued, now, I'll outline our specific tactics for the new season. Listen closely. The Munich 1860 players straightened up and focused. Tong Yi nodded approvingly. Our overall strategy is to defend aggressively from the front. The forward line is our first line of defense. They will press high, and the lines behind them must follow, maintaining the spacing and overwhelming the opponent with pressure. They'll press, block passing lanes, and prevent the opponent from playing calmly. We'll use ultra-high-intensity defense to force them into mistakes in their own half. After winning the ball, we'll launch quick counterattacks, scoring simply and efficiently. Even just hearing Tong Yi's description, the players felt a strong sense of pressure. They now understood why he stressed physical fitness so much. If they tried to play with Tong Yi's tactics without the proper conditioning, they'd collapse before the game was over. Tong Yi continued, of course, this tactic sounds simple, but it's difficult to execute. You need good awareness, exceptional fitness, a sense of spatial awareness, and a clear understanding of the designated area to stay in. 1-on-1, 1-on-many, 2-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, overall defensive positioning and the number 5, plus pressure prediction, and it's going to be very complicated. Tong Yi still had a lot to say, but it would be too much to cover in one day. The players felt immense pressure and became even more anxious. Tong Yi added, so, we'll focus our training on defending and attacking in specific areas, focusing on 1-on-1, 1-on-many, many-on-1, and many-on-many in small areas like 3x3, 5x5, and 10x10 meters. Then, I'll divide the entire field into sections, and each player must understand where you should be positioned, when to support teammates, and when to pressure together. Some of the Munich 1860 players looked shell-shocked. Tong Yi went on, we'll train specific defensive and offensive routines, and focus on offensive efficiency. You'll have a lot on your plate, and I'll be demanding. This will be the toughest training you've ever experienced, because you have to learn so much in so little time. But I have faith in you. The players' faces fell. A painful journey was about to begin. Tong Yi tried to lighten the mood. We have a game in 3 days, and you won't be familiar with the new tactics yet. So, don't worry about the score. Just focus on executing the game plan. 032, the pressure brought by the first warm-up match. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. In Tong Yi's system, his center-backs have to be able to distribute the ball effectively, specifically, make accurate long passes. Tong Yi needs them to quickly spot the wingers or forwards after winning possession and launch immediate counterattacks. The current center-backs aren't great at this. Senderos is decent, but not amazing, he'll do for now. Campbell is another story, and then there's Kavanjanides, the Georgian international, who is okay, but nothing special. He's the best Tong Yi could find for now. He can't just go out and buy ball-playing center-backs because Munich 1860 is broke. If they had the cash, Tong Yi would be all over guys like David Luiz and Hummels, both fantastic at those long passes. And don't forget Chiellini, Ferdinand, and Sergio Ramos, all center-backs with great distribution skills. Sadly, they're practically all untouchable. Luiz is tearing it up for Benfica in Portugal, so Munich 1860 doesn't stand a chance of signing him. Still, Senderos and Campbell are enough for Tong Yi for the time being. Actually, Tong Yi's system puts even more pressure on the fullbacks. They're basically wingbacks. They need insane stamina, blistering speed, the ability to bomb up and down the flanks, and great passing ability. They are critical to the team's attack. The wingers often have to rely on the fullbacks to get the ball forward. In Tong Yi's system, the two wide midfielders tend to drift inside more, orchestrating attacks and delivering killer passes. You could even call them the offensive core or the engine. They operate more like attacking midfielders. This means that after winning the ball back with a high press in midfield, they can instantly launch a quick counterattack, threading through balls that put the opposition on their heels. Tong Yi is also toying with the idea of using different types of wingers, maybe having one type on each side to give the team more variety in attack. Regardless, these two positions are always going to be hugely important to Tong Yi. At least Munich 1860 has one midfielder who can organize the play and deliver those killer passes. Tong Yi already has a target in mind and plans to bring him in soon. He also wants a midfielder who can win the ball back with hard tackling and interceptions, and make late runs into the box when needed. When the two midfielders push forward, one of them has to drop back and form a three-man defense with the two center-backs, covering the space left by the advancing fullbacks. Up front, Tong Yi is keeping it fairly traditional, aiming for a classic big man/little man combination. That's why he brought in Diego Costa, Griezmann, and even Vardy. That's the general idea behind the tactics. But the reality is way more complex. Tong Yi patted the tactics board. That's all for today. Take it all in. We'll start training in 5 minutes. Then Tong Yi handed out the role descriptions for each position, along with the details of offensive and defensive strategies for different situations. The Munich 1860 players were stunned by how professional it was. Even the Munich 1860 coaches were impressed. Winkler turned to Bruns, who had just returned to Germany, and said, "I didn't think he had it in him. We totally underestimated him." Bruns nodded slightly. "He's really something." Bruns was genuinely shocked. He'd seen the information before, and it was pretty groundbreaking. Tong Yi had redefined the roles of many positions on the field, and the tactics were incredibly flexible, with endless offensive and defensive variations. Some of the ideas were completely new to him, and it was hard to believe a 24-year-old could come up with them. Campbell was amazed when he saw his own role description and the information for the other players. He looked at Senderos and said, "Our little coach is incredible." Senderos nodded in agreement. He was shocked too. These tactics were pretty cutting edge because the most popular style right now was the possession-based game of the Spanish national team and Barcelona. After all, Barcelona and Spain had been dominating the world in recent years. Everyone was trying to copy that possession-based style, often using a strikerless formation. Of course, there were some different approaches out there, like Mourinho's defensive tactics and Klopp's high-energy style. But they were all pretty unique to those managers. Tong Yi's tactics weren't exactly like theirs. He had his own distinct approach. Senderos couldn't help but say, "Wow." The older players on Munich 1860 were also blown away by what Tong Yi had brought to the table. Big Hoffman was dumbfounded and said, "Looks like Torben was wrong. This Chinese guy isn't a fake. He's got the goods." De Salvo and Bayerovka nodded in disbelief. Tong Yi had exceeded their expectations. Bayerovka said, I don't know if this tactic will work, but it's impressive just to come up with this stuff. It's beyond what's currently out there, it's ahead of its time. Big Hoffman nodded, agreeing completely, and equally shocked. This soft rice coach is really something. DeSalvo agreed with them. He was also impressed by Tong Yi's abilities, he said. He's definitely talented, and the tactics look great. But this is really tough for us old guys. I don't think there'll be a place for us in a system like this. Big Hoffman and Byarovka were surprised, and then they nodded. DeSalvo was right, this tactic was hard for veterans like them. They sighed, said nothing, and seemed a little deflated. At that moment, Big Hoffman wasn't sure if what little Hoffman had done was the right thing or not. Anyway, they weren't interested in discussing it anymore and fell silent. 5 minutes later, Tong Yi blew his whistle, signaling the players to get moving and start training right away. Bruns immediately gathered the players. Tong Yi called offensive coach Stekris and defensive coach Kruger over. He said, "We're going to do a 5-on-5 drill. Here are the training instructions and the tactical objectives for both offense and defense. Take a look and then get them started." The two took the information from Tong Yi and studied it carefully. Tong Yi asked, "Any questions?" They replied immediately, "No problem." Tong Yi waved his hand. "Let's get started. We don't have much time." The two men nodded and hurried off to organize the training. Soon, the 5-on-5 drill began at the number 1 training ground. The attackers were Kyle Walker, Griezmann, and Costa, and the defenders were Senderos, Campbell, and Hammond. At the start of the attack, Griezmann had the ball on the wing. Kyle Walker saw an opportunity and charged down the sideline. Costa immediately moved towards the center, drawing the defense and trying to create more space for his teammates. He remembered a key point of Tong Yi's tactics: whether it's offense or defense, it's all about controlling space. Seeing Walker pushing forward, Matic immediately moved to cover him and prepared to defend the wing. Because there were no fullbacks in this drill, he had to step up, but he couldn't be reckless. He positioned himself well, staying between Griezmann and Walker without leaving himself exposed. The coaches on the sidelines were impressed by Matic's positioning and defensive awareness. At that moment, Griezmann suddenly cut inside, dribbled laterally, and brought the ball towards the center. He wanted to draw Matic into the middle, open up the wing, and create space for Walker. Campbell charged out quickly and was in front of Griezmann in the blink of an eye, putting him under intense pressure. Griezmann didn't expect Campbell to be so aggressive, stepping up so far ahead of the test. Griezmann was caught off guard, and it was hard to even get a shot off. Tong Yi's eyes lit up, an attacking opportunity was opening up. However, the attacking players didn't realize it. Griezmann took a tough shot, pulled the ball laterally again, and signaled Diego Costa to come back and receive the pass. Costa immediately returned the pass, and Griezmann fought to get the ball to Costa under Campbell's pressure. Toot toot, star. Suddenly, a sharp whistle sounded on the training ground, confusing everyone. What was going on? Couldn't they see they were training? As everyone looked around, Tong Yi ran onto the field and said, "Didn't you read my tactical instructions? Simple and fast, use the fewest passes possible to create scoring chances, cut out the unnecessary dribbling, and keep the tempo up." Got it. That everyone realized that Tong Yi wasn't happy with what they'd shown in training, but the coaches around the field thought the attack was fine. Griezmann had made a good decision, broken the defense, and passed the ball to Costa. No one knew why Tong Yi was unhappy. Griezmann and the others looked at Tong Yi blankly, confused. Tong Yi went to Griezmann and said, "When you cut inside, shake off Matic, and face Campbell, you should immediately cross the ball and pass it between those two, behind them. Send the ball into the corner of the penalty area, and we can tear their defense apart." Then he turned to Walker on the wing and said, "Don't be so predictable with your runs. I want you to help out in attack, and try to make crosses. But when you see an opening, you have to boldly cut into the penalty area and create a chance to score." There was a great chance just now. When Griezmann moved laterally to shake off Matic, you should have changed direction, slipped behind Matic and into the corner of the box, and then you could have taken a shot. Everyone thought it over and suddenly realized that there was a great opportunity to do just that. Tong Yi continued to say to Walker, "Be bold, sometimes you can play more like a winger, you know." Walker understood and nodded. Then, Tong Yi turned to Griezmann and said, "Be bold, be bold with your passes, even if it's a little risky. If we lose the ball, we immediately press and attack, and try to win the ball back. Got it? Griezmann nodded slightly, indicating that he understood. Then, Tong Yi went to explain the tactics to the defensive players. The coaches on the sidelines looked at each other in amazement. This Chinese guy really knew his stuff. It was incredible. In the following training sessions, Tong Yi often called timeouts and went over details with the players. He was very demanding. It seemed like Tong Yi was already feeling the pressure from the game in 2 days. The players were impressed and were even more active in training. Bruns exclaimed, "This guy is really good." At that moment, Pintus ran over, clearly worried, handed the newspaper in his hand to Tong Yi, and said anxiously, "David, we're in big trouble." 033, the parallel import coach's first defeat is coming. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Tong Yi took the newspaper Pintus offered, but instead of reading it, he looked at Pintus. "Is this about Jacob again?" Pintus gave a mixed nod and shake of his head. "Yeah, but not entirely." Tong Yi frowned. "What's the story?" "Better see for yourself," Pintus replied. Tong Yi snatched up the newspaper. A huge headline screamed at him, "Little Hoffman, Tong Yi is the biggest amateur coach ever." Tong Yi's eyebrows shot up. He hadn't expected Little Hoffman to pop off so soon. The article was by Jacob, but the bulk of it was an interview with Munich 1860 player Junior Hoffman. According to Hoffman Jr., "This Chinese guy is the weirdest, worst coach I've ever had. He doesn't know anything. I doubt he even understands pro soccer. He's just an amateur. If it wasn't for his girlfriend, a pretty boy like him would never have gotten near Munich 1860. Tong Yi scoffed. Little Hoffman was clearly holding a grudge. He kept reading. Little Hoffman continued, "He's done only one thing since joining Munich 1860. Wanna know what it is? Traveling the world. England today, Spain tomorrow, France the day after. He doesn't even realize his job is football." The paper quoted Little Hoffman as saying, "Training? He has no clue. He leaves it all to his assistant. Usually, during practice, he just stands on the sideline like a statue, doing nothing but watching. Sometimes, I think the eyes behind those sunglasses are closed. This Chinese guy must be able to sleep standing up. That's gotta be his only skill." Little Hoffman wasn't finished. When he joined the team, he made a training plan. It was all about physical conditioning, nothing else. And he just made the plan. Pintus does all the actual training. As for tactics, forget about it. We're still doing physical training. Yeah, you heard right. The game is around the corner, and we haven't done any tactical drills. That's our new coach for you, a pretty boy. Munich 1860 fans, can you really let a coach like this keep leading the team? Tong Yi saw Little Hoffman was desperate to get out. Hoffman Jr. also stated, "I questioned why we were only doing conditioning with no skills or tactics, and he kicked me off the team. He's a complete dictator who doesn't know a thing. Frankly, it's disheartening. If we let a clueless coach lead the team, Munich 1860 will probably end up in the 3rd division. This damn Chinese pretty boy will become the scapegoat for Munich 1860. We can't let him keep ruining the team, he needs to go ASAP. I'm telling you, if this soft-boiled guy doesn't leave, Munich 1860 is doomed." Little Hoffman rattled off a laundry list of Tong Yi's offenses, portraying Tong Yi as a clueless guy who only became head coach because of his girlfriend. He claimed that since joining the team, Tong Yi had done nothing but travel at the team's expense. Young Hoffman even said Tong Yi didn't understand pro players, treating them like track athletes instead of human beings. He claimed the daily workout load was 2 or 3 times higher than other teams, and he feared their bodies would be wrecked before the season even started. He said he voiced his concerns for his and the team's safety, and Tong Yi kicked him off the team. Clearly, the report was a tearful condemnation of Tong Yi, expressing concern for the team and urging fans to unite and get rid of Tong Yi ASAP to restore a clear sky to Munich 1860. Reporter Jacob also asked Hoffman Jr. his prediction for the upcoming game. Little Hoffman stated, Munich 1860 will definitely lose. That Chinese pretty boy is a joke. Tong Yi smiled faintly after reading it, not particularly bothered, just the yapping of a stray dog, nothing more. Pintus frowned. David, you're in a tough spot now. Those fans who are making trouble. Tong Yi clapped Pintus on the shoulder. It's okay. The sky isn't falling. Let's keep training. He added, starting today, we'll do skills and tactics in the morning, and physical recovery in the afternoon. This is where you come in, and it's crucial. Whether or not we have a good season depends on you. Pintus nodded, understanding, but still looked concerned about Tong Yi. Tong Yi patted Pintus again, smiling. Don't worry, this doesn't affect me. Turning, Tong Yi headed towards the training field, yelling at the players, press. Press. Bring the energy. Close down the space, surround him. The players looked surprised, then picked up the pace and started training seriously, but their execution was rough, and they lacked coordination. Their timing was off, and despite their efforts, they barely pressured the opponent. The Munich 1860 players started to get anxious. The game was only a few days away. Tong Yi kept shouting, run. Run. Don't hold back, run for me. Tong Yi was on his feet, correcting every move. Periodically, he would stop the play to make his points to the players. All his attention was focused on the techniques and tactics. This was a complete departure from his previous, more laid-back style, and shocked Pintus and the others. Stekris was on the sideline, meticulously taking notes. From now on, he'd be responsible for offensive training, and he needed to understand Tong Yi's tactical vision. The Munich 1860 players were exhausted after that day's training. Many could barely stand. The training was brutal, just as Tong Yi had warned, especially the veterans, who couldn't handle the intensity. Tong Yi immediately signaled the team's medical and physical therapy team to come provide post-workout care and recovery. Tong Yi cared about the players' well-being and didn't want anyone getting hurt. While the players received treatment, Tong Yi said, "Good job today. I'm very satisfied. I expect you to keep it up. The training will get even harder. Be ready for it mentally." The Munich 1860 players looked worried. It was already rough. Tong Yi continued, preseason preparation is critical. We don't have much time, so the training intensity is high. We have to do this to have a good season. After the season starts, the training won't be this intense, only for about a month, so hang in there, guys. Big Hoffman and the others looked a little awkward, being called guys by a 24-year-old, but the team was young. Many of the players Tong Yi had brought in were younger than him, so it wasn't wrong. Tong Yi went on, next, we're focused on training. Practice and tactical work are our only goals right now. So, for the game in a few days, don't worry too much about the score, or even the warm-up games later. These games are for practicing tactics and finding weaknesses, so don't feel pressure. Just play well and follow our tactical plans. If you meet the tactical requirements, it will be a success. Now the Munich 1860 players understood why Tong Yi hadn't done tactical training earlier. He didn't care about the warm-up results. This took the pressure off, and they could focus on training and learning the new tactics. The players trained hard and seriously, which pleased Tong Yi. The team's progress was good, boosting Tong Yi's confidence for the new season. Soon, the game day arrived. Munich 1860's first warm-up game was about to begin. Coach Tong Yi, ready for 1860 Munich star. First game coming up. A large crowd flocked to Allianz Arena. They were curious and wanted to see what Tong Yi was all about. They wanted to see if he could cut it in professional football. The media was out in force, paying even closer attention to this game than Tong Yi and the players. Jacob was present, sitting a few rows behind the bench. Next to him was Junior Hoffman, a player from Munich 1860's second team. Clearly, these two were there to see Tong Yi fall flat on his face. In their minds, Tong Yi's team couldn't beat Bayern Munich's youth team. They were just there to watch Tong Yi fail. As game time approached, the Munich 1860 players looked nervous and excited. Many were new and playing for the team for the first time. They wanted to show their strength to the fans and coaches and make a good first impression. Addressing the team, Tong Yi said, "This is our first game. I want you to pay attention, play according to our tactical plans, and execute what the coaching staff wants to see. You've only been working with this new tactic for a few days, so you're not going to be familiar with it, and you'll make mistakes. But don't be afraid of mistakes, and don't worry about them. It's a warm-up game, so the result isn't important. It's a good thing to expose our problems and deficiencies so we know what to focus on in training." The Munich 1860 players nodded. They knew Tong Yi was using the game as an extension of training. The players worried about the team's warm-up results. Tong Yi said, "Okay, let's get ready for the game." The Munich 1860 players headed out of the locker room to warm up. Bruns immediately approached Tong Yi. "Are you sure this is a good idea? If you lose the warm-up game, or the results are bad, the pressure on you will increase." Then Tong Yi waved dismissively. "It's okay. I have 3 months. They can't fire me no matter how bad the warm-up games go." Bruns countered, "But what about the fans and the media?" Tong Yi waved him off. "Don't worry about them. We need to focus on ourselves and stick to our training plan. That's the key. If we follow our plan, we'll impress everyone when the season starts." Hearing that, Bruns didn't say anything. He could only hope everything went according to Tong Yi's plan. The teams finished warming up, and the game was about to begin. 0-34, 5 consecutive losses at the beginning. Tong Yi is about to be dismissed from Get Out of Class. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 5 straight losses. Tong Yi had been coaching Munich 1860 for a month, and already they'd racked up 5 consecutive defeats. This wasn't exactly shocking anyone among the fans or sports reporters. What does some Chinese guy know about football? How can a 24-year-old kid from China understand professional soccer? They wondered. Only a bunch of brain-dead executives at Munich 1860 would buy into Tong Yi, this clown, let him coach the team, and create this whole 3-month trial thing. It was a joke. They figured the guy should be fired now, before the 3 months were even up. Actually, they shouldn't have hired him in the first place. How could a guy who slept his way to the top ever be successful? Baker's lost his mind. The Munich 1860 fans were furious. They swamped the team's official website, spewing insults and vicious attacks on Tong Yi, and blasting the club's leadership. The website crashed a dozen times from all the traffic, but that didn't even begin to satisfy their anger. They gathered outside the club headquarters, burning jerseys, scarves, team flags, anything they could get their hands on. They chanted, "Coach, get out. Baker's gotta go." They even laid siege to the training grounds, waving banners covered in curses, telling Tong Yi to pack his bags and get out of Munich 1860. Almost every day, they'd be out there, screaming abuse from behind the fence. Some of them even hurled rotten eggs and splashed coke at Tong Yi. The team's training facility was now closed to the public. Even that didn't stop the diehards from scaling the walls, rushing in, and throwing stuff at Tong Yi. Just the other day, some nutjob climbed over the wall, jumped the fence, and charged Tong Yi, ready to kick him where the sun doesn't shine. But Tong Yi was quick, grabbed him, tossed him to the ground, and pinned him in seconds. The guy was just screaming, "Ouch." The Munich 1860 players just stood there, mouths open, staring at Tong Yi. Turns out our coach has got some moves. Besides the fans, all those who had a bone to pick with Tong Yi came crawling out of the woodwork. First up was little Hoffman. Ever since Tong Yi relegated him to the second team, little Hoffman hadn't played in a month, and he'd lost more than half his pay. He was livid and absolutely hated Tong Yi. He became the ultimate anti-Tong guy. Just yesterday, he went on a Munich TV sports show and unloaded, blasting and humiliating Tong Yi. He said, "Nobody doubts that this Chinese pretty boy is a nothing but a player. This trash has become the head coach of Munich 1860. This is a shame for Munich football, and a disgrace to German football. As long as this pretty boy is here, the shame will only get worse. I can't let this pretty boy stay in this position any longer. I must kick him out." He didn't hold back on the nasty stuff, even stooping to dirty insults. If the host hadn't kept trying to cut him off, he would have gone completely ballistic on air. He ended with, "All Munich 1860 fans, now we should unite and drive this damn softy out of Munich 1860. That damn Baker will also pay the price for this, and that little bitch Martina even more. We will nail her to the pillar of shame in history, ban her from the Allianz Arena for life, and keep them away from Munich football." Then Jacob jumped into the fray, piling on the criticism. He wrote a 3 or 4-page article detailing Tong Yi's hiring, spending most of the space attacking Tong Yi, the team president, and Martina. He wrote, "I just don't get why this loser is still head coach. Are the Munich 1860 executives all brain damaged?" That even a ton of German celebrities chimed in, slamming Tong Yi and calling it a national disgrace for German football. It blew up into a major scandal, and the pressure on Munich 1860's management was unbelievable. President Baker was even called in to meet with team owners, who demanded he fix the situation immediately. Otherwise, he was out. Baker finally realized how serious things were, returned to the club, and held a meeting with his senior staff. Stoffels was probably the happiest guy in the room. This was exactly what he wanted. Not only was Tong Yi in deep trouble, but even Baker was feeling the heat. Honestly, he was hoping something bad would happen to Baker. It would give him a chance to move up. At the meeting, he said, "From the beginning, I didn't agree with hiring this Chinese guy. Even after he was hired, I didn't think we should give him such great rights. Look at the players he brought in. A bunch of nobodies who can't even make other teams. Does he think he can win games with those guys? Huh, give me a break." Stoffels' sneer was so harsh that it made everyone present turn pale. Stoffels continued, "They can't even make other teams youth teams. Are you still putting your faith in this Chinese guy? Torben's right. He's useless, knows nothing, and just lets others do all the training. He's a joke. I think we need to fire him now. If we don't, Munich 1860 will become a laughingstock of Germany." He wasn't holding back with Baker. Baker just winced. The other executives agreed with Stoffels and insisted that Tong Yi had to go immediately. Baker said, "His 3-month contract isn't up yet. If we fire him, we'll have to pay a ton in penalties. Do you think we can just throw away that much money?" When signing the contract, Tong Yi had one thing in mind. After setting a deadline of 3 months, Tong Yi must ensure his 3-month deadline. Therefore, Tong Yi added a clause in the contract. If the 3-month period is not reached, Munich 1860 will have to pay a very high liquidated damages if they want to fire him. It wouldn't break them, but it would definitely sting. That was exactly why Tong Yi had insisted on it, and why he hadn't cared so much about the results of the warm-up matches. Otherwise, he would definitely not do this. Stoffels was caught off guard, and his face turned red with anger. The other executives looked pretty grim, too. They finally reached a decision. Baker called Tong Yi to his office and said, "David, you know the situation. The fans, players, media, even the celebrities are all putting on the pressure. My staff and I can barely stand it anymore. We can't fight the whole world, you know." Tong Yi frowned, thinking, "Are they going to fire me early?" He paused, then said, "I understand." Baker nodded. "Good." Tong Yi looked at Baker and said, "The club's going to fire me then?" "I get it, but you still have to pay what you owe." Baker winced. He knew this was coming. He quickly said, "Originally, we were just going to fire you outright. But I stuck my neck out for you and got you a chance." Tong Yi looked up. "What kind of chance?" Baker said, "The first round of the German Cup is tomorrow. If you win and get the team to the next round, you'll stay on as head coach until the end of the 3 months. But if you lose, we expect you to resign voluntarily." It was a pretty raw deal, and Tong Yi could easily call Baker's bluff. After all, a contract was a contract. But then Baker added, "David, Martina and I have done a lot for you. Please don't make it difficult for us, okay?" Hearing that, Tong Yi nodded and said, "Don't worry, Mr. Chairman. If I can't win tomorrow, I'll resign myself." With that, he stood up and left. The worst had happened. Tong Yi had figured his worst-case scenario was finishing the 3 months with bad results and getting canned. But now the deadline was tomorrow. If he lost, his coaching career was over before it even started. Tong Yi felt the pressure. There was no room for error tomorrow. Just then, Martina called. She knew things were tough and wanted to offer support. She said, "How about I come back tomorrow? You've been under so much stress lately." Tong Yi felt a surge of warmth. "No, stay in Italy and do your job. You know what I'm capable of, right? I've got this." Martina gave up on coming back but spent some time encouraging him on the phone before hanging up. After the call, Tong Yi felt a little lighter. He was still feeling the pressure, but he had faith in himself and his players. He was ready for tomorrow's do-or-die battle against Paderborn. He knew he could lead the team to victory. All those who doubted him, just wait. He wouldn't let them win, he would win the game. 035, there is only one goal, win. You are listening at novelfull.audio. August 1, 2009, Allianz Arena, Munich, Germany. The sky was a clear, brilliant blue. The first round of the German Cup season was about to kick off, with Munich 1860 hosting Paderborn. A massive crowd of fans streamed into the Allianz Arena. They hoisted banners reading "Hoffman out" and waved flags demanding Hoffman fired. They were making their feelings about Tong Yi abundantly clear, hoping to drive him out of Munich. One particularly large poster depicted a cartoon clown in a black suit being swept away by a swarm of people wielding brooms. The clown, of course, was Tong Yi. Beneath the cartoon, a huge slogan screamed, "Sweep Tong Yi and his trash out of Munich." That even before the match began, the fans were chanting in unison, their voices hoarse with the demand for Tong Yi to leave Munich. Their hatred was palpable, the atmosphere was electric, and in the press box, Jacob was practically glowing with satisfaction. He considered himself the architect of Tong Yi's current predicament. He'd stoked the flames, inciting the fans and pushing Tong Yi to the brink. He leaned back, crossed his legs, and a smug smile crept across his face. "Let's see you get out of this one, kid," he muttered. Not far away in the stands, Munich 1860 player Junior Hoffman sat stiffly, eagerly anticipating the start of the game. He'd heard from inside the club that if Munich 1860 didn't win, Tong Yi, the softy, would be sacked. The thought thrilled him. Finally, Tong Yi would get what he deserved, and Hoffman would reclaim his place on the first team as a key defender. He practically wished for Munich 1860 to lose immediately. The roar of the fans chanting for victory was music to his ears. He couldn't resist a boast, "Look how hated you are, kid. You're done for." That he was impatient for the game to start. The media reporters who arrived were stunned by the size and intensity of the crowd. This felt more like the German Cup final than a first-round match, and Bayern Munich wasn't even playing. Reporters scrambled to capture the scene with cameras and video recorders. The excitement was contagious, and viewers at home were caught up in the fever, eagerly awaiting kickoff. The game was being broadcast live nationwide. Fans all over Germany could tune in. After a months-long off-season, German fans were starved for action. Their pent-up passion exploded with the start of the German Cup. The pre-game buzz and media coverage had piqued the curiosity of countless people, who all wanted to see what the fuss was about, and just how bad was this Tong Yi guy, really. In a first round lacking any real marquee matchups, this game had become the unexpected main attraction, driving up the ratings. Fans across Germany were tuning in to see Tong Yi humiliated. Fans of rival teams were eager to watch the Munich 1860 faithful squirm. They couldn't fathom how the club's management could hire such a green coach. It seemed absurd. The TV audience was on the edge of their seats, ready for the game to begin. Hello everyone, and welcome to German TV 2. We're bringing you live coverage of a highly anticipated first-round match in the 2009-2010 German Cup, featuring Munich 1860 vs Paderborn. I'm Fred, and joining me today is the legendary Jürgen Klinsmann. Announced commentator Fred Klinsmann, dressed casually, sat beside him. Klinsmann had been the head coach of Bayern Munich last season but was fired in April after a string of disappointing results. Now, he was lending his expertise to German TV 2. The network often brought in football celebrities as commentators. In fact, they had even invited Tong Yi's former mentor Frank and his brother Klopp to provide commentary at one point. Klinsmann greeted the audience. "Hello fans. I'm Jürgen Klinsmann, and I'm excited to be here with you today to watch what promises to be an interesting match. Fred chuckled. Sounds like you've heard about all the buzz around this one, Jürgen. Klinsmann nodded. Absolutely. The media's been all over this game. Especially Bild, they've been running stories about it for the past week. It's hard to miss. You know, you can get tired of the same meal every day. Fred laughed. Who would have thought an ordinary German Cup match would become the talk of the town, right? Klinsmann agreed. Never would have guessed it. Is this game on your radar because of the Chinese coach at Munich 1860? Fred asked. Klinsmann shook his head slightly. Not really. I'd never even heard of the guy before all this. I don't know anything about him. The media attention is the only reason I'm paying attention. Fred nodded, then pressed further. But you must have learned something about him from the reports. What's your impression? Klinsmann frowned. He seems very lucky to have a girlfriend who got him this job. He must be good with women. I mean, how else could he land such a position? Fred chuckled. Right. He must have some secret weapons. I bet he'll become an icon for guys everywhere. He paused. So, Jürgen, what do you think of his coaching abilities? Do you think he's qualified? Klinsmann hesitated. To be honest, I've never met him. I don't know what he's capable of. From what I've read, he seems like a complete novice, leaving all the training to his assistants. This. Fred jumped in, a smirk on his face. So you're saying he's a fake coach? Klinsmann quickly backtracked. I didn't say that. But some reporters have called him that. I'll have to see the game to make my own judgment. Fred was a little disappointed. Why couldn't Klinsmann just rip into Tong Yi already? Fred tried again. So, Mr. Klinsmann, what's your prediction for the game? Who are you picking to win? Klinsmann replied, both teams are in the Bundesliga, so they should be fairly evenly matched. But Munich 1860 has undergone major changes this season. New coach, new players, it's all a bit of a mystery. And they haven't had much time to gel as a team. I don't see them being able to put together a real team so quickly. Fred nodded. Makes sense. So you're not optimistic about Munich 1860. Klinsmann continued. Paderborn, on the other hand, has kept most of its lineup intact. They've also made some strategic additions this summer. Their strength has improved considerably. So, I'm leaning towards Paderborn. I think they'll pull out the win. Fred nodded slightly. I'm personally betting on Paderborn too. Munich 1860 has been a mess ever since Tong Yi took over. Before this German Cup match, they played 5 warm-up games and lost every single one. They even lost to Bayern Munich's second team. Paderborn should have no problem winning this. Klinsmann nodded in agreement, becoming even more confident in his prediction. Fred said, all right, the game is about to start. Let's take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back with the action. As the broadcast cut to commercials, Tong Yi stood in the home team locker room at Allianz Arena. He stood before the tactical whiteboard, addressing the Munich 1860 players. Before we get started, I want to make something clear, he said. I don't care about the results of the warm-up matches. I'm not going to say a word about how badly you lost. But for the official competition, I have only one goal, to win. 036, it's not that I underestimate the enemy, it's that he's not good enough. You are listening at MaleProtagonist. The locker room was packed. Every player for Munich 1860 sat hunched in their seat, eyes glued to the tactical board behind Tong Yi. The board displayed the results from their last 5 matches. Bayern Munich youth team vs Munich 1860, 1:0. Stuttgart vs Munich 1860, 3:0. Munich 1860 vs Nantes, 0:1. Munich 1860 vs Trabzonspor, 1:3. Augsburg vs Munich 1860, 2:0. The stark, red numbers sparked anger in the Munich 1860 players. Their eyes burned with frustration and shame. Some clenched their fists so tight their knuckles went white. Tong Yi drew a thick X over the string of defeats. He turned to face the team. These preseason games don't mean everything, but they do show where we're at. I know the losses have shaken your confidence. Some of you are even questioning whether my tactics work, right? No one spoke. They just stared at the floor. Tong Yi chuckled. Silence means yes. Vardy immediately shot up, his voice full of forced enthusiasm. Coach, we don't doubt you. Your tactics are killer. We know you can lead us to win. He looked around for support. Right, guys? Nobody echoed his enthusiasm. Vardy faltered, then seemed to realize what was happening. He turned back to Tong Yi, shouting, Coach, I'm with you 100%. A few players glanced at Vardy, surprised he still had so much faith in Tong Yi. Brainwashed, some probably thought. Then De Gea chimed in, I believe in you too, Coach. Everyone turned to look. They hadn't expected De Gea to speak up. Tong Yi waved his hand. Okay, enough of that for now. Whether you believe me or not, I want you to give it everything you've got. Play your best. I don't want to lose, and I know you don't either. Nobody wants to lose. The Munich 1860 players nodded. Tong Yi continued, we've been working on these new tactics for about a month. You're all familiar with them now. You might not be perfect yet, but you've got a handle on it. I know you felt how strong these tactics can be in practice, but we haven't proven it in a real game yet. Campbell nodded, agreeing completely. Tong Yi's tactics were powerful. The constant pressure was intense. They hit the ground running and never let up, giving the other team zero room to breathe. Campbell was sure many teams in the second division of the Bundesliga couldn't handle it because their footwork just wasn't sharp enough. Since the Augsburg loss a week or so ago, they'd really started to click in training. They felt more and more comfortable with the new system. As they practiced together, Campbell felt like they could finally take down a team like Augsburg. That's why seeing the scores on the board stung so much. Campbell said, he's right, coach. We know these tactics. I'm confident in them. We're going to shock everyone today. We're going to win. Griezmann, Matic, and others joined in, chanting about victory. Bruns finally let out a relieved breath. He'd been worried Tong Yi was losing the team, but things were looking up. The players were fired up. He felt a little more confident about the match. Still, doubts about Tong Yi lingered. His tactics sounded great on paper, but who knew how they'd play out? And Bruns wasn't sure Tong Yi had what it takes to be a head coach. Truth be told, he kind of hoped Munich 1860 would find a new coach. Even so, he didn't want to see them lose. Big Hoffman and the others frowned. They disliked Tong Yi, maybe even hated him. Without the guy, Munich 1860 wouldn't be in this mess. Their future wouldn't look so bleak. They felt like if Tong Yi stayed in charge, Munich 1860 was doomed. They wanted him gone, but they were outnumbered. Tong Yi had brought in a ton of new players, and those guys were all on his side. They supported him completely. There wasn't much the old guard could do. This was the new Munich 1860, a team of loyalists, hand-picked by their head coach. Big Hoffman watched with cold eyes, waiting for Tong Yi to fail. He didn't think much of the coach and expected Munich 1860 to get crushed. Tong Yi went on, I might as well tell you, I have an agreement with the front office. If we don't win a game in Zhejiang, I'm out. I resign. The players' eyes went wide. Big Hoffman and his crew were shocked, but also stoked. Tong Yi was finally going to get canned. The dark cloud over Munich 1860 was lifting. They looked at each other, buzzing with excitement. Tong Yi's recruits, on the other hand, looked surprised, worried, even panicked. Their future felt uncertain. The pressure was on. If Tong Yi left, everything he promised them would disappear. Without him, would they still be in the starting lineup at their age? Would they get the same opportunities? Who knew how the new coach would feel about them? They were all freaking out. Tong Yi saw their reactions. He waved his hand. Don't worry. I'm not going anywhere. If you take this game seriously and play the way I've planned, we will win. I believe in you. You need to believe in yourselves. They felt a little better, but still worried, Tong Yi said firmly, "Stop overthinking it. Clear your heads. Focus on the game. I chose you guys. I believe in you. You need to believe in yourselves. We're going to win." The new players slowly calmed down and recentered. They knew how important this game was, not just for Tong Yi, but for them too. They were in this together. Tong Yi couldn't lose, and neither could they. Matic took a deep breath, stood up, and said, "Coach, we got this. We'll give it everything we've got. We'll play our hearts out and win every game." Vardy and the others stood up, pumping their fists, roaring, "We gotta win. Munich 1860 gotta win." Big Hoffman and his buddies raised their eyebrows, surprised. These young punks were actually confident, but they still scoffed. They didn't think Munich 1860 stood a chance because they didn't believe in Tong Yi. Satisfied with the team's response, Tong Yi said, "All right, let me tell you what to watch out for in this game, which players to focus on." The Munich 1860 players listened intently. In the Paderborn locker room, head coach Andre Schubert looked relaxed. He said to his players, "The other team is young. More importantly, they've been thrown together at the last minute. They're all over the place. Their preseason games prove it. Don't worry. Just stick to what we've practiced. We'll win this." Paderborn's players looked calm and nodded in agreement. Schubert checked the time. "Kickoff's coming up. Let's go." The Paderborn players filed out and headed for the field. As the players walked out, assistant coach Osif Sarek frowned and asked Schubert, "Andre, aren't we underestimating them?" Schubert smiled and waved his hand. "You think that softy can give us trouble? Don't even. What can some guy who slept his way to the top do? He doesn't know anything. Beating him will be easier than stepping on an ant." Sarek frowned, uneasy. Schubert sneered. "It's not that I underestimate them, it's that they're not good. Have you even watched their preseason games? How can he compete with Paderborn? We're gonna win, no question." Sarek stared ahead, convinced Schubert was underestimating their opponent. Schubert clapped Sarek on the shoulder. "Okay, don't sweat it. Let's go. The game's about to start." The two teams followed the referee onto the field at Allianz Arena, the first round of the German Cup, Munich 1860 vs Paderborn. The game was about to begin. 037, thunder in a silent place. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Boom. 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 The war drums pounded, shaking the stadium as the fans roared, their screams reaching a fever pitch. Tong Yi could hear the dueling chants, the energy electric. The players stood behind their coaches, ready to go. Tong Yi grabbed the number 10, a blonde player. "Tintin, hold up." The guy, Tintin, turned around, revealing a baby face that, along with his hairstyle, was a dead ringer for the cartoon character Tintin. This was Kevin De Bruyne, Tintin himself. De Bruyne had come with Tong Yi from Belgium to Munich 1860 for about €1.5 million. He'd only been at the club for a week, but Tong Yi had already handed him the number 10 jersey and made him the centerpiece of the attack. Whether Munich 1861 today depended on De Bruyne came over. "Boss, what's up?" Tong Yi said, "Be aggressive out there. Win the ball, launch a counterattack, and make those killer passes. Don't sweat the turnovers, just win it back." "Got it?" De Bruyne nodded. "Got it, boss." Tong Yi patted him on the back. "No pressure, just play your game." De Bruyne nodded again and rejoined his teammates. The ref waved them onto the field. Instantly, the players from both teams turned serious and followed the referees. As they entered the stadium, a deafening roar erupted. Fans screamed for their teams, offering their support. The Munich 1860 players were pumped, especially the new guys like De Bruyne, who were even more hyped by the noise. They'd heard the German fan culture was intense. Experiencing it firsthand was unreal. They felt like they could run through a wall. "Let's go," they thought to themselves. "All right, the players are on the field, let's get ready to rumble." Fred announced. The crowd went wild. Tong Yi, in the tunnel, took a breath and walked out into the stadium. "Wow, there's Munich 1860's Chinese coach, Tong Yi. He's been here before, but this is his first official game at the Allianz Arena. Let's see what his team can do. Fred said. Boo! The Munich 1860 fans unloaded a tidal wave of boos as Tong Yi emerged. It was like they wanted to tear him apart. The noise was deafening, stunning the visiting fans. Ha ha ha. Did you hear that? The Munich 1860 fans are booing their own coach. That's gotta be a record for most hated coach in German soccer history. Fred said, practically giddy. Coming out of the tunnel, Tong Yi was swallowed by the boos. He felt like a small boat tossed in a storm, but he kept his cool, walking steadily like nothing was happening. Damn! Tong Yi is taking it like a champ. Doesn't seem to faze him. Impressive. Klinsmann said. Tong Yi walked to the bench. A fan in the stands next to the tunnel got overexcited and chucked his Coke at Tong Yi. Then another, and suddenly a wave of Coke and beer rained down on him. Whoa! The Munich 1860 fans are out of control. That's going too far, people. You can't do that. Even if you hate him, you can't act like that. Red exclaimed. It was chaos, with people throwing bottles at Tong Yi. Luckily, he was already some distance away, or he'd have been soaked and probably hurt. The Munich 1860 staff panicked and rushed to protect and escort Tong Yi. Pintus asked, David, you alright? Tong Yi shook his head. I'm fine. Stand back, they can't hurt me. But the staff stayed put, shielding him as they walked to the bench. Bruns, a Munich 1860 lifer, was livid. These fans were crossing the line, embarrassing the club. He spun around and yelled at them, calm down. You're fans, not hooligans. You want to get arrested? Cool it. Then he caught up to Tong Yi to check on him. The fans roared, get out. You idiot. Get out of Munich. The Chinese guy is out. Munich 1860 doesn't want you. The atmosphere was insane. The players were shocked. They didn't expect this. When did the coach become the main attraction? The Paderborn players smirked, their faces full of ridicule. Even Paderborn's coach, Schubert, looked smug. He turned to his assistant, Sarek, and said, we even need to worry about this guy. This game is a joke. We've got this. He started toward the Munich 1860 bench, but before he took 2 steps, he saw Tong Yi walking toward him. Schubert was taken aback by his calm demeanor. He didn't expect Tong Yi to be so composed in this situation. Tong Yi ignored the abuse and walked up to Schubert, offering his hand. Welcome to the Allianz Arena, Coach Schubert. Schubert scoffed, ignoring the hand. Save it. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to tell you that this isn't a game. Not everyone can be a coach. You're going to lose, and you're going to lose big. Then he turned and walked away. Whoa! Did you see that? Schubert just dissed Tong Yi's handshake. Wow, this game has some serious drama. This is gonna be good. Fred said, hyped. Tong Yi was stunned. He didn't expect that kind of hostility. He hadn't even done anything to the guy. Tong Yi smiled, lowered his hand, and went back to his bench. He saw the angry looks on the Munich 1860 players' faces. They'd seen Schubert's arrogance and felt the sting of Tong Yi's humiliation. They wanted to make him pay. De Bruyne even yelled, don't worry, boss. We got this. Tong Yi nodded, signaling them to stay focused and stick to the plan. They could beat Paderborn. This is getting intense. Let's check out the starting lineups. Fred couldn't wait. Tong Yi was running a 4-4-2. The starters were, De Gea, back line, left to right, Jose Holba, Gavanianize, Campbell, Kyle Walker, midfield, left to right, Griezmann, Hamann, Matic, De Bruyne, forwards, Diego Costa and Lauder. Klinsmann said, Munich 1860 is starting a bunch of kids. Is Tong Yi out of his mind? Throwing rookies into a German Cup game? That's. Fred said, this lineup proves Tong Yi doesn't know the first thing about soccer. No wonder the fans hate him. He's a total amateur. Why is he even doing this? Shouldn't he be home eating off his sugar mama? Why bother with all this hard work? Jacob, in the stands, smirked. You're dead, you loser, he thought. He felt almost pity for him. He'd been overreacting. This guy wasn't worth the effort. When Schubert saw Tong Yi's lineup, he burst out laughing, turning to his assistant. See? Told you I wasn't underestimating him. I'm going to beat the crap out of him and show the world he's a fraud, a gold digger who slept his way to the top. We are winning this game. That the Paderborn players couldn't believe what they were seeing. Did they just send out the junior varsity? They could win this one in their sleep. They looked at Schubert. He nodded fiercely, and they knew the plan. No holding back. Time to crush these guys. Beep. The ref blew the whistle, and the game began. Paderborn went on the attack. No warm-up needed. Alright, the game is on, and the players are going at it. Honestly, I don't get Tong Yi's strategy. How can he start that lineup? Didn't he lose badly enough in the warm-up matches? Or is he too busy thinking about his girlfriend? Fred said. Klinsmann shrugged. Fred continued, but I'm jealous of Tong Yi. His girlfriend is gorgeous, great body, killer legs. I'd eat that soft rice all day long. Whoa. What happened? What happened to Paderborn? Klinsmann screamed, interrupting Fred's fantasy. Fred jolted forward, staring in disbelief at the Paderborn goal. The ball bounced around in the net. The crowd was stunned. Schubert spat out the water he'd just drunk. A goal. Munich 1860 scored. 038, Tong Yi, this parallel importer, is not smart enough. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Goal. Barely a minute into the game. Nobody saw that coming. And the shocker? It wasn't Paderborn who scored, but Munich 1860, the underdogs. The crowd was stunned, frozen like statues. No way. Munich 1860 scored. Seriously? Unbelievable. Munich 1860 fans rubbed their eyes in disbelief, convinced they were seeing things. On the sidelines, Paderborn's coach, Schubert, was speechless. How could this be happening? How could a team coached by him score a goal, let alone take the lead? Impossible. His assistant, Sarek, was equally stunned. In the stands, Jacob's eyes bulged. Wow! Did we just see that? Munich 1860 scores in the first minute, taking the lead against Paderborn. What a shocker! The commentator, Kling Simon, was almost speechless. The sudden turnaround had caught everyone completely off guard. He was still trying to process what had happened. Griezmann, ecstatic about his goal, turned and sprinted to the sidelines, wrapping Tong Yi in a bear hug. Coach, I scored. I scored. Tong Yi hugged him back, saying, great job. Keep playing like that. To be honest, Tong Yi was pretty pumped himself. After letting go of Griezmann, he pumped his fist and glared at Schubert, who was staring back, pale as a ghost. Schubert scoffed, don't get cocky. The game's just started. Paderborn will win this, guaranteed. That was fast. We barely saw it. Let's go to the replay and see how that goal went down, said Fred, the other commentator. The replay started on the TV screen and the stadium's big screen. Everyone watched intently, including Schubert. At the kickoff, Paderborn played the ball back like usual. But as soon as the whistle blew, the Munich 1860 players swarmed forward, pressing Paderborn hard. Paderborn was caught off guard. Maybe they were too relaxed, or maybe they underestimated Munich 1860, thinking it would be an easy win like Schubert said. But the Wolves of Munich 1860 were already closing in. Younes Arouche, the former Germany U20 midfielder, struggled to pass the ball back to defensive midfielder Marcus Kroesch under pressure from Costa. Kroesch, a veteran player since 2001, was usually reliable. But with Lauder and Costa hounding him like a pack of wolves, he panicked. Without looking, he blindly passed the ball towards Philipp Haidt, who was supposedly on the left wing. Normally, Haidt would have been there. But he'd pushed forward, seeing the Munich 1860 fullbacks pressing, leaving the wings open. Kroos thought that if he could pass the ball diagonally, they would have a chance to attack from the start, maybe even score, but instead of dropping back to receive the ball, Haidt charged forward. Kroos' pass went straight into empty space, a bad pass. De Bruyne swooped in, stole the ball, and charged towards Paderborn's midfield. Kroos tried to recover, intercepting De Bruyne. Centre-back Søren Günther went to cover Lauter, while Costa sprinted diagonally into the right side of the penalty area. Paderborn's other centre-back, Sebastian Stradlich, marked Costa, preventing him from breaking free as Lauter moved forward to receive De Bruyne's pass. Suddenly, a huge gap opened up in Paderborn's defense. De Bruyne spotted it instantly. Without warning, he flicked the ball with the outside of his left foot. It curved beautifully through the gap between Kroos and Günther, rolling perfectly into the left center of the penalty area. The moment De Bruyne passed, Griezmann sprinted from the left, cutting diagonally into Paderborn's penalty area. Paderborn's right back, Jens Wimmer, was too slow to react. Griezmann blew past him, so fast that Wimmer couldn't even grab him. Perfect pass. The ball and the player arrived at the same time. Griezmann calmly controlled the ball in the open space, facing the goalkeeper, Kasper Jensen, a former Danish youth national team player, who was rushing out to make the save. Jensen, at 6 feet 4 inches, wasn't particularly quick. Griezmann slotted the ball past Jensen and into the net. The transition from defense to offense was lightning fast. The crowd was still trying to catch up. Wow! That was a simple, efficient goal by Munich 1860. From stealing the ball to scoring, it was just a blink of an eye, and just one amazing pass. De Bruyne's imagination, his audacity, incredible. Klinsmann gasped, impressed. Maybe it was a little luck, but De Bruyne's reaction, vision, and passing were undeniable. That spark of inspiration is what separates the good from the great. De Bruyne definitely has potential. The fans took a breath. It was so fast, so unexpected. Schubert closed his eyes, thinking, we got unlucky. Munich 1860 had all the luck today, scoring after just 2 touches of the ball. What a load of bull. He turned and glared at Tong Yi, then barked at his players from the sideline, heads up. Don't let that lucky goal get to you. Forget about it and play your game. They won't get that lucky again, understand? That the Paderborn players nodded, agreeing that it was just a fluke, just bad luck. Schubert continued, they're not as strong as you. Just focus, and we'll win. Give those Munich guys a lesson. That the players nodded, regaining their confidence. Jacob in the stands also dismissed it as a stroke of luck for Munich 1860, nothing more. You'll still lose this game. Just luck. They got lucky. But it won't last. Paderborn isn't going to let them get away with this, Fred commented. Klinsmann agreed that Munich 1860 had been fortunate and Paderborn should still win. I think Paderborn should win too. But will Munich 1860 bunker down and defend their lead? If Tong Yi is smart, he'll set up a brick wall defense and hit them on the counterattack. They have someone fast up front, perfect for that. Fred started to worry. Could Munich 1860 pull off an upset? Jacob's eyes widened, alarmed. No, that soft-boiled coach can't win. Schubert was also concerned. He didn't want Tong Yi to park the bus, making it tough for Paderborn to break through. Stoffels, watching from the VIP section, looked annoyed. No way. Is he going to get lucky like this? That he couldn't believe it, but soon, their worries vanished. Tong Yi, the soft-hearted one, was clearly hopeless. Instead of telling Munich 1860 to defend, he was urging them to press forward like crazy, as if they were the team losing. Schubert, Jacob, Stoffels, and the rest laughed. What an idiot. Fred said, I guess we overestimated that coach from China. He's going all out, like his team is behind. How did he even get the job? I feel bad for Munich 1860 fans. You deserve better. You should replace, cough. Fred choked, unable to finish. Klinsmann was stunned. The stadium went silent, shocked again. Jacob leaped out of his seat, yelling, oh my God, could it be? Schubert's eyes were wide, his mouth agape. Another goal. And the scorer, Munich 1860. 039, the Munich 1860 team showing its fangs. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Another goal. And it's still Munich 1860. Paderborn's players were stunned, the fans were in shock. Even the commentators were speechless. What is going on? Klinsmann could feel his face burning. He knew he must be bright red. Just a minute ago, he'd been ranting about how Tong Yi didn't know anything about football, was fundamentally weak, and was too stupid to defend a one-goal lead by pressing forward. Now, Munich 1860 scored again. It was like a slap in the face, and it stung. He was mortified. Fred wasn't doing much better. His jaw dropped as he stared at the field, completely blindsided by Munich 1860's goal. Everyone was in disbelief. Klinsmann sucked in a breath and quickly glanced over at Tong Yi on the sidelines. Tong Yi was getting mobbed by his players, Matic especially. After the goal, Klinsmann was stunned again. Tong Yi, the soft-boiled coach, clearly had the respect and support of his team. The way they swarmed him after a goal, could this guy really be a total amateur? A clueless figurehead? Apparently not. Anyone still calling Tong Yi an amateur or a fraud was dead wrong. There was more to him than met the eye. In the stands, little Hoffman and Jacob exchanged looks of disbelief. How was this possible? How could that Chinese loser score another goal? It made no sense. Little Hoffman was going ballistic. Before the game, he trashed Tong Yi in front of the media, calling him a clueless guy who slept his way to the top. Now, his team was up 2-0 less than 10 minutes in. Was that the mark of a clueless coach? Little Hoffman felt like a laughingstock in the making. Tong Yi had dealt him a crushing blow. This game might be the end of his career with Munich 1860's first team. His face was dark with rage. Jacob was just as furious. He wanted to destroy Tong Yi at any cost, and his pre-game coverage had been relentlessly critical. Now, Tong Yi's team had a 2-goal lead. Luck. It had to be luck. Tong Yi was clueless. There was no way his team should be winning. It was pure luck that Paderborn was playing so poorly. Jacob refused to give Tong Yi any credit. On the other side, Schubert was sweating and his hands were shaking. He was rattled, he was nervous and overwhelmed by the turn of events. Born in 1971, Schubert was only 38, very young for a soccer coach. Honestly, he didn't have that much experience. He'd only become head coach of Paderborn's second team in 2006, and this year he'd taken over the first team. This was his first time as a head coach. Like Tong Yi, he was a rookie, but, unlike Tong Yi, Schubert had worked as a youth coach after retiring as a player, and even served as an assistant coach for Germany's U15, U16, and U17 national teams. Still, his solo coaching experience was limited. Now, he was starting to panic. Munich 1860's changes and performance had completely caught him off guard. He was stunned. With his experience, he'd never taken Tong Yi, a guy who slept his way to the top, seriously. Now his sense of superiority had vanished, and he was starting to sweat. He ran to the edge of the field, screaming at his players, "What are you doing? Why are you panicking? How are they stealing the ball and scoring so easily? Get serious. Or heads will roll when you get back. Get it together." Schubert was in a state. The Paderborn players on the field were even more panicked than Schubert. Munich 1860 was pressing relentlessly, like a pack of wild dogs chasing meat, going all out. They were playing with intensity, putting in huge hits. It was nearly impossible for Paderborn to control the ball. Passing lanes were shut down. And if you held the ball too long, a Munich 1860 player would strip it from you. They were forced to pass back, and back again, pushing the line back to their own penalty area. The defensive pressure was immense. To protect their goal, they were forced to boot the ball out of their zone. The ball quickly went back to Munich 1860, and that wasn't the worst of it. The worst was getting intercepted and counterattacked. Munich 1860's counterattacks were lightning fast, not giving them any chance to reorganize their defense. Taking advantage of the chaos to pass into the center of the penalty area, straight towards your goal, and scoring the shot. That's how Munich 1860 scored their first goal, and that's how they scored their second. The second goal was almost identical to the first, with a few minor changes. Under the relentless pressure from Munich 1860's two forwards, veteran Krosch made another bad pass. The ball went straight to Matic, who quickly passed it to De Bruyne streaking down the wing. De Bruyne took off with the ball. Paderborn's players had been burned by De Bruyne before. They swarmed him, determined not to give him any space. But just as they closed in, De Bruyne sliced a pass with the inside of his right foot to the left wing. Griezmann easily took control of the ball. Facing Paderborn's right back Wimmer, he dribbled past him, using his speed to blow by his opponent. The crowd went wild. Griezmann cut diagonally into the penalty area, driving towards Paderborn's goal. Paderborn's goalie Jensen moved to block the near post, and both centre-backs tried to cover. But they were occupied by Costa and Lauter, who were closing in on the 6-yard box, leaving a vacuum in the penalty area. Griezmann sent an inverted triangle pass to the edge of the box. Matic followed and blasted the ball into Paderborn's goal. 2-0. Munich 1860's attack was too fast, slicing through the defense in just a couple of passes. Klinsmann was impressed. Munich 1860's high press was effective and suffocating. Paderborn's players were struggling under the pressure. They were cracking just 10 minutes in, making critical errors. If they didn't fix the problem, they'd continue to give up goals. Klinsmann exclaimed, "Wow, I'm seeing shades of Dortmund's tactics in Munich 1860. They're using a similar high press. But the two teams are different. Munich 1860's press is more suffocating than Dortmund's, which makes their opponents desperate. The question is, how long can Munich 1860 maintain this level of intensity? Can they keep it up in the second half?" Fred nodded in agreement. The Munich high press is very effective, but they can't sustain it for the entire game. Paderborn needs to weather the storm for 60 minutes, let Munich wear themselves out, and then counterattack. They still have a chance to win. Schubert didn't see it that way. He was panicking, focused on scoring and tying the game. Paderborn was just as good as Munich 1860, Schubert shouted from the sideline, "Push forward. Pressure them back. Attack their penalty area." The away fans cheered wildly, encouraging their team. They believed Paderborn was better than Munich 1860, that Munich 1860 was just getting lucky. They couldn't keep it up forever, they would lose the ball. Schubert was constantly directing the team from the sidelines, but it wasn't working. His players were under too much pressure to control the ball. And even when they got close to Munich 1860's penalty area, they were shut down by Campbell's incredible defense. He was a wall, preventing any advantage. Munich 1860's defense is very good, they're pushing forward and staying in their own zone, making it hard for Paderborn to threaten their goal. It's very damaging to Paderborn. We underestimated Munich 1860, Klinsmann said. Fred said, "I think Paderborn just needs to adjust to Munich 1860's high press. Once they do, they'll overwhelm Munich 1860 and score." Just then, the crowd gasped, "Another goal." Munich 1860 scores again. This time, Munich 1860's high press paid off again. Matic intercepted a pass from Paderborn's attacking midfielder Soren Brandy, and quickly passed the ball to winger Luther Brown. De Bruyne faked a cut inside before sprinting to the end line. He sent a cross into Paderborn's penalty area. Costa jumped and battled with centre-back Gunther for the header. The ball deflected toward the goal and landed in front of Lauter. Lauter fired a shot into the near post. 3-0, Munich 1860 was up by 3-0. The second half will be dominated by us. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It's in. It's in. Munich scores. Lauter, the local boy, buries it. Fred yelled, a dagger to the heart of every Paderborn fan. The visiting fans were in shock, down 3 goals to Munich 1860. This couldn't be happening, even the Munich 1860 faithful were stunned. Was this the same team led by that softie? How could they be scoring so easily? This was a completely different team from the one they saw in the preseason scrimmages. Everyone was baffled. Should they even be celebrating? Meyer, head of the Blue Lions fan club, just stood there, eyes glazed over, like a statue. "Hermann, should we be cheering?" Someone beside him asked weakly. Meyer was blank, as if he hadn't heard a word. Jacob's jaw dropped. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Halfway through the game, and the team run by that pushover was up by 3. Was he dreaming? He turned to little Hoffman, who was equally stunned. He'd even gotten to his feet, pointing at the field and muttering, "No way, this isn't real." Jacob shook his head. Little Hoffman was taking it hard, but no one was feeling worse than Schubert on the sidelines. He refused to believe it. It had to be an illusion. How could that wimp's team be up 3 goals? He was completely lost. On the field, Paderborn's players were shell-shocked, wandering around in a daze. Klinsmann jumped in. "This game has blown everyone's expectations. Paderborn isn't as good as we thought, and Schubert, that former national star, isn't adapting quickly enough. This is going to be a tough blow. If they don't pull themselves together, they're going to get completely humiliated." Even though Fred wasn't a Munich 1860 fan, he agreed. "Yeah, Paderborn looks lost out there. If they don't wake up, they're going to get slaughtered." Sarek watched Schubert's dejected figure and sighed. Before the game, he'd warned Schubert not to get complacent, not to underestimate their opponent. Even if the coach was a Chinese guy, and a young one at that, he had to be taken seriously. He didn't land the job just because of his girlfriend, right? Surely he knew something, and now, look at this mess. He shook his head, wondering why Schubert hadn't listened, but he was an assistant coach, and it was his job to step up. "Andre," he said, "things are going south fast. Munich 1860's tactics are way beyond what we expected. We need to regroup, play it safe for the rest of the half, and not let in any more goals. We'll make adjustments at halftime, and we can still turn this around." Schubert blinked, turning to Sarek with a blank stare. Sarek sighed inwardly and said, "Andre, we need to move now." Schubert snapped awake, finally understanding. "Right, we have to adjust, or we're cooked." He spun around, walked to the sideline, and signaled his players to calm down. "Drop back, defend in your own half, and make sure we don't concede again before the break." The Paderborn players got the message and retreated into a defensive posture. Klinsmann commented, "Okay, Schubert's finally reacting. That's not a bad move. They can't afford to let in any more goals before the half. Otherwise, it's game over. 3-0 at halftime is bad enough, but if they get their tactics right, they can still come back." Fred turned to Klinsmann. "You still think Paderborn can win?" Klinsmann, still siding with the Germans, replied, "Yes. Tong Yi's tactics caught everyone off guard. Schubert and Paderborn weren't ready for it. But they should have figured out Munich 1860's game plan by now. If they adjust during halftime, they can pull it together." Paderborn fans watching on TV were relieved to hear it. They knew their team always came back. Fred pressed, "So, Munich 1860 has no chance?" Klinsmann frowned. "Of course they have a chance. They're up big right now, and they could definitely win. I'll admit it, I underestimated Munich 1860 and Tong Yi. But their tactics aren't unbeatable. All you have to do is shut down De Bruyne, and Munich 1860's offense collapses. Without worrying about defense, Paderborn can go all out on the attack and break through Munich 1860's line. Their players are too young, inexperienced, and can't handle the pressure. Their fitness will drop in the second half, and when they're under pressure, they'll crack. That's why I'm betting on Paderborn." The fans at the stadium and at home cheered Klinsmann's name. They agreed, Munich 1860 was going down. Bruns approached Tong Yi. He looked at the coach with new eyes, his face showed surprise and appreciation. This game was a showcase for Tong Yi's tactics. It was incredible. Standing on the sidelines, he felt the pressure himself. No wonder the Paderborn players were so flustered, their ball control all messed up. This relentless, in-your-face pressing was working wonders. Tong Yi had real talent. He'd underestimated this Chinese guy. Everyone in Germany had underestimated him. But this Chinese coach was something else. He walked up to Tong Yi. "David, you've been pressing hard for a long time. Shouldn't the players get a break? Let them catch their breath. Otherwise, the second half will be a disaster. You'll run them into the ground." Now Bruns understood why Tong Yi had emphasized the importance of endurance training at the beginning of the season. He understood why Tong Yi had put them through such grueling workouts. It was all worth it. Big Hoffman, watching from the bench, finally understood it too. He realized their opposition had been wrong. But he wasn't about to apologize to Tong Yi. Tong Yi looked out at the field and said calmly, "They're backing off, and we should too. Looks like they want to coast to halftime. Let's give them what they want." Bruns nodded in agreement. Tong Yi nodded, then walked to the sideline and signaled the Munich 1860 players to slow down and hold their positions. They had a 3-goal lead, the win was in sight, no need to rush. Paderborn would definitely attack in the second half. Suddenly, the game went from a storm to a calm sea. Watching the peaceful scene on the field, everyone wondered if that 3-0 score was just a dream. Soon, the referee blew the whistle, ending the first half. Munich 1860 led Paderborn 3-0. During halftime, in the owner's box, Munich 1860 chairman Baker was beaming. He glanced at Paderborn chairman Wilfried Fink with a smug grin. "See? My new head coach is a good one, isn't he? Low salary, great results. Amazing, that he couldn't have been prouder." He wasn't just talking to Fink. He was talking to Staffs, who was standing next to him. Who would dare criticize him for hiring Tong Yi now? For favoring him? Okay, so he had connections to Tong Yi. But so what? You shouldn't discriminate against relatives when talent is involved. Tong Yi was brilliant, so of course he wanted him on his team. If Tong Yi kept getting these results, Baker bringing him in would be a legendary move. When that happened, everyone would remember Baker's genius. Who would care about Tong Yi's niece-in-law? Baker was relieved and gave Tong Yi a mental thumbs up. He hoped Tong Yi kept this up, leaving his critics in the dust. Fink's face was a mask of fury. Baker's gloating made him see red. That damn Schubert. How could the half end like this? Didn't he promise me an easy win? What happened? Fink raged. What Fink didn't know was that Schubert was even angrier. During halftime, Schubert went ballistic in the locker room, giving the Paderborn players the Ferguson hair dryer treatment. The players hung their heads, staring at the floor. Schubert roared, "I'm so disappointed in you. Look at you out there, skating around. You're getting run ragged by a bunch of kids. It's embarrassing. Are these kids really that good?" The Paderborn players didn't dare breathe. Schubert went on, "I can't believe you. You have so much more experience than they do, and they're dominating you. I don't get it." Schubert then went on to criticize each player individually. Finally, feeling a bit better, Schubert said, "Munich 1860 can't keep up that pressure all game. Their stamina will run out. I predict their fitness will collapse around the 65th minute. That's when we strike. I expect you to seize the opportunity and prove yourselves. Understand?" That the Paderborn players nodded and roared in unison. Schubert added, "In the second half, you need to focus on defending their young number 10. Marcus, you're responsible for sticking to him like glue. Wherever he goes, you follow. Don't let him get the ball." "Got it." Krosch nodded. "Got it." Schubert nodded, pleased. "We shut down De Bruyne. How are they going to attack?" He continued, "When the game starts, we're going to have to absorb some pressure. You have to dig deep and hold the line." "Okay." The Paderborn players confidently roared, "Got it." Schubert felt a surge of confidence. "We will dominate the second half." But just 2 minutes into the second half, Munich 1860's Costa ran wildly in the stadium to celebrate, because Munich 1860 had scored again.